Helen is teaching a foundation stage class, which includes children with English as an additional language, hearing impairment and autism. She is halfway through her final placement and is now planning activities that enable all children to access the learning objectives. During their planning discussion, Holly, the mentor, contextualizes the individual children's needs and encourages Helen to think about how to differentiate the learning objectives in line with the needs of the pupils in the class.
With regards to the writing, I think I'd quite like to focus on Antonio and getting him to do really good independent writing, because a lot of the time he needs, I think, an extra push. A lot of the time he does rely quite heavily on having somebody model it for him.
Yeah, he's such a perfectionist in his nature. Yeah, he finds it quite hard to have the confidence to have a go himself. A
lot of the time he does try to get adults to write it for him.
How are you going to, have you got thoughts at this point of how you're going to sort of support him in doing that? Is there anything particular that you think might really help him?
Having maybe a whiteboard and model some of the letters that I know that he is not so confident in.
Yeah. If you don't have that modelling there for him at all, he'll just feel abandoned and he'll just give up. Things like getting him to sit near you so that he doesn't feel like he's got to do a lot to get your attention and things like that, so that you're there as a, as a physical presence to support him as much as anything else, I think will help too.
Yeah, I'd quite like to focus on Hugh as well.
Right, because he's made fantastic progress in his mark making.
And less of the tracing over my writing and more of the actual mark making himself, holding the pencil correctly.
And I think with you, I don't think that he'll understand the idea of putting something in a bottle. I'm not sure that he'll get that, but I think that actually for Hugh, the experience of sitting down with a group of children and doing that mark-making activity, I think that will appeal enough, and that if we then take the bottles when we go swimming on Wednesday, in some ways it will then fall into place.
Yeah, so putting it in context for him. With Mist, I'd like to focus her on really getting her letter formation. That's, I think, where she needs to go next.
Yeah, absolutely. Because being left-handed as well, she's got such confidence sounding out her own letters and making brilliant, plausible phonetic attempts. She's also got now a big sight vocabulary with accurate spellings of words that aren't phonetically regular. Because only 5 weeks ago she was still writing from right to left. She's made that transition from left to right quite quickly. I think that's really important when you set your objective, and even though this is a writing activity that you've thought, okay, I want to really motivate them to write independently, that actually for a child like Mist, who has that motivation, who writes independently frequently throughout the day, actually that's not what her need is. So in many ways we need to change the objective for her. Yeah, and I don't think you should ever be afraid to do that. The children are much more important than the learning objective. The learning objective should reflect the children's needs, not vice versa.
Our boat sunk, and so we were stranded in the ocean.
The activities planned around the story are designed to be inclusive for the wide diversity of needs within the class. After the lesson, Holly's open questions encourage Helen to reflect upon her own practice, evaluate the effectiveness of pedagogical strategies, and articulate targets for her own development. This example of effective mentoring illustrates the strong connections between inclusive practices and a teacher's underlying value systems.
How did you feel the whole class session went from the point of view of introducing the topic of ocean?
I could have focused questioning perhaps to those children who I thought would have had a lesser understanding of ocean than those who immediately put their hand up and they had the answer straight away. For example, Eugene, who isn't very proactive in putting her hand up and answering questions.
And I think the sort of thing that probably would support somebody like Eugene, because she's got English as an additional language, so to just follow the spoken word is, again, really hard work with her. To use something visual and to have that visual stimulus so that she knows exactly what it is that you are talking about might have helped. Or maybe for you to have run the session the other way around, so to have done the book first and then had the discussion, what do you know about the ocean, and then introduce the writing the letter in the bottle, and just turning it round in that way. And to do something like make a mind map or something like that is often a really useful way of recording that sort of information, or using some sort of clip art.
With regards to the writing activity, I think it would have been perhaps better to have them all seated together and then started together as a group and then gone around to each individually.
In some ways, when you start them off all at the same time, it then means they all need you at exactly the same time.
Yeah.
With it being an independent activity, what was it that made you think that actually starting them together would have been better?
If they were aware that I would help them individually, then they wouldn't all wanting my attention at the same time, and they would have been aware of the fact that I was going to help them each individually.
Right, so it's giving yourself as the teacher the opportunity to explain to them what the task is, what your expectations are.
Because I hadn't said, I want you to do writing as independently as possible, I think it would have then been beneficial if I'd have said that.
From what they were writing, was it clear that they'd understood the task as well? That they were writing a message. So I mean that's great, you know, and that's kind of writing purposefully.
My main objective was to get them to do it as independently as possible.
Did you find it quite easy to stick to that objective that you'd set for yourself, and how did you tailor that for different children as they were responding to the activity?
With children such as Antonio and Hugh, it was more doing independent mark making, so that was you know, perhaps not responding to the book as much as the other children would have done, because he may not have understood the task as well as the other children. And with Antonio, I used the whiteboard.
Did he respond well to that?
Yeah, we did I write one and then you have a go, and so I tried to encourage that. Quite a few of the letters he was unfamiliar with, but when he had a go, he, I think, surprised himself because he knew more than he actually let on.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I think that strategy of you do one and I'll do one is a really great strategy to use with somebody like Antonio. You know, the way that you were working with him was really different in some ways to that of the majority of the class, or the objective for your teaching might have initially suggested. That's completely appropriate to him. That's what he needs to be able to get to that next level. From what you've done this morning, how do you need to continue that on and build on what you've learned?
I think it would be important to focus on the children who are less willing to give information on the carpet through direct questioning, or using more visual aids, so that I am ensuring that they can respond to the activity and access it as well as the other children.
Yeah, and I think that's it. It's to kind of, it's really important that you acknowledge your role in enabling them to feel that they can contribute in that whole class session. There is always a place for questioning when you write your plans, to think, okay, well, what am I expecting here? What are the children's interests? What is it that I'm wanting the children to learn? How is it that what I'm expecting from different children is going to be different? Who is going to be supporting them? And continually questioning yourself like that. And I think that there is a really key role for mentors to be supporting the trainees in that, both the practice of questioning and also the art of answering those questions, or looking at the different ways in which you can answer those questions before you can end up with inclusive education.